Hey guys, so it's been years since my last video. Welcome back. Reason being for me being gone from here is that after graduation I just didn't have access to studio anymore. So I spent some time just working my ass off and saving some money so I could buy myself a kiln, and I got a small one. And in other news, I now moved from Europe and I'm in Brooklyn, New York, working from home. And today I'm gonna show you how I make a fun two-color portrait. If you've seen my previous videos, you may remember I always painted just with water as medium. I got very comfortable doing that, but it also meant that you can only fire one layer at a time. So doing a portrait would take me so many firings, like anything from 4 and up to 7 depending on color scheme. So it's not great for my patience, and of course it's using a lot of electricity. So I have recently started working more with other mediums like oils and glycol, and I really recommend to try this out if you haven't. It's very intimidating at the beginning, but you can get a hang of it. So I'm not a teacher, so I'm not calling this a tutorial, more of a demonstration. And you obviously don't have to follow it blindly. If you choose to, try something similar, just see what you can adapt for your own painting. And I would say this video is more meant for people who, have the basics down, and maybe you're comfortable painting, flowers or animals, but you get stuck when it comes to portraits. So this one's for you. So first things first, as you see, I just cut the glass. I chose a coffin shape because I happen to have a coffin shaped frame lying around, so I want to use it for this. But of course it doesn't have to be anything grim like that. You can have a standard shape you want. So the beginning is, as usual, I start doing my lines. I just mix some black paint with water and quite a good pinch of gum arabic, and I put this in my little container and I shake it vigorously until it's well blended together. And I test my tools, so I'm gonna use not only my paintbrush but also a fountain pen, and just try several nibs, see what works well. And I'm going right in and doing the lines. And when you do portrait, just be careful, don't overdo it with the lines. There are rarely any really harsh lines in the face, and it's like a mistake I see often when people will, for example, trace around every tooth if you have a portrait with a person smiling, showing their teeth, and it tends to look really, really cartoony. So unless it's a look you're going for, then yeah, that's fine. But we're gonna try to do it at least like semi-realistic here, so I'm only adding black harsh line where it is really needed. Also remember, you can always add later, so if in doubt, I would always follow the rule, less is more, and you can always add later. I am gonna share something that could be helpful if you struggle with blending halftones. So I'm gonna take my reference photo, and put some tracing paper on top, and I'm actually gonna use my pen and just trace around every large mass, starting with the dark and then the mediums and then the light ones. I used to do this when I was working as a tattoo artist, and I would tattoo portraits, so this would kind of be my guidelines, where to, put what shade. So I'm implementing it often if it's a more difficult portrait. I don't always do this, but I thought it might be useful to some of you. So yeah, just trace around like I said, any larger masses, so it can guide you later on while you're gonna do your shading. I'm only using one type of pen here, but you can use, different color pens to make it even, more apparent and obvious as you work as to what's what. While all this talking, I see that the lines are done in the video. I'm just making sure they're completely dry, and then I'm gonna flip our piece and use a brush to cover everything with a light wash of gray. As you would do per usual, use badger brush to blend in. Now I'm pulling the highlights, and I notice with spots that are supposed to be completely light. So I'm only pulling what really I think is necessary, such as, eyes, and he has this light spot, large one on his nose, some on the lips and a little bit on his cheeks. And I switch between stippling and scratching, so whatever you're more comfortable with, just go for that. I'll take a second to talk about the reference photos you choose. And this is also another mistake I see often with a bit of a failed portraits, is bad reference photo. And if that's bad, then the end result will also not be great, I can promise you that. So you need something where you can actually see the details, where it's not too blurry, especially if you're going to work on a bit of a larger scale. I don't recommend starting with tiny portraits if you don't have a lot of experience. Going bigger is actually often easier, at least for me it was that way. Also, if you're new to this, maybe don't start with full color portraits, which would have 5, 6, 7 or more different shades of skin tones. Painting on glass is much more difficult than on paper, even though you're tracing and even though you feel pretty confident painting on paper. I can promise you this is quite different. I'm not saying this to discourage you, I'm just saying it because there are a lot of technical things you need to learn and understand before you can move up to next level of painting. So if you're starting out, do black and gray for starters, and you can do something like I do here, add one color. It doesn't have to be green, whatever you feel fits your purpose. Also, I think it's smart to pick a face you know well, and that way you'll notice more easily if some features are off. And I think picking like a celebrity, actor, musician you like is a good way to start. Maybe don't start with family members. At least for me, there's always underlying pressure painting someone you know, and it adds to overthinking and worrying, is it close enough? Will they like it? Did I make the nose too big? And so on. With a famous person, if you screw up, if it's not perfect, nobody will care or need to know. So pick a photo with good contrast, make sure you have spots that are really dark and then the highlights are really light. It will make it so much easier to differentiate the halftones lying in between. Because I see a lot of new painters struggle with that, and executing a super soft portrait is actually quite difficult, and you will very likely be tempted to trace the lines where not necessary. So try to make it easy on yourself while you're learning. We don't need unnecessary challenges just yet. So a total tragedy happened. My phone died while filming and I wasn't aware. So there's a little portion of the video missing. So what I did after pulling the highlights is that I covered the entire piece with some lavender oil, very thin layer. I'm really sorry that you can't see how I did that, but I'll do the same process on my second firing, so just bear with me and you'll see how it's done. Nothing difficult. And yeah, so there's like a light coat on top of my wash, and I'm starting to work on the shadows. And since we're working with oil, it should be obvious that we also blend our pigment with the same oil. So yeah, as you see, I have some paint on the side and using different brushes and a little blending badger brush, I start working on the shadows. Looks like application is quite rough, but once you're starting to blend, you know, oil kind of move things around, so you can really push the paint around where you need it to be, or even remove. So don't be scared to like get in there. And I'm working like all over the place, as you see. I'm jumping like from eye to the side of the face to the nose, back and forth. It's for one reason that for the ink to settle a little bit, because it's not dry like you have with water, so it kind of needs to rest for a few moments, so I can see if I need to add more or not. And also just because it's easier for me to see if the person starts looking like himself in this portrait. So for me it's easier to kind of work on the whole face a bit all over the place simultaneously, so I can like compare the values between, you know, different shades and shadows. But that's up to you if you're more comfortable, you know, doing one eye, then the next eye, then forehead, then the nose, whatever works for you. And this part of the video is really sped up because I spent, I think, 1.5 hours doing this. So be patient, you know. I'm quite an experienced painter, not the best out there, but I work pretty fast. But even for me it took this long, because, you know, I don't have much experience working with oil, first of all, but also it's just very important to take your time. Like, don't take shortcuts, you know, take a break, go look at it again. Oil allows you to work for quite a bit. After an hour or more, you might notice that the oil is starting to get quite thick. You might add a little bit of more oil to your brush, or if you want, which I like to do, I just use it to my advantage. Here's some close-up on the lip, and you can see how the thickness is creating a lot of texture depending on the brush you use. So if you, like me, like texture, you can really use it to your advantage and get this painterly effect, almost like you would paint, you know, on an oil painting. I know some people prefer like very polished look, almost airbrushed looking, you know, very smooth. In that case, if you think you're overworking, there's too much texture, then just take a break. Most importantly, just make sure that all the highlights are removed. You can fire this piece and then do the same process all over again to add more. Alright, so round 2, this has been fired, and I'm gonna take my green color and I'm gonna cover both sides, front and back, with a layer of it. It looks extremely green, like Hulk green, but I know my paint and I know it gets tends to be quite transparent. It gets lighter as it fires, so be sure to know your paint, you know, do the testing so you don't risk, you know, getting the wrong color or wrong transparency. And yeah, so this is all just green paint with a lot of gum arabic and water. So just like first step, just different color. And this time I am barely pulling any highlights. I'm just doing his eyes because I want that to pop, his pupils, and teeny tiny bit on his lips. make sure to pull those eye highlights from both sides also. And some of you might do more, you know, like the white on his nose and forehead, but I don't really want a lot of spots on this piece to be clear glass. I just think, you know, it looks good on the table, but once you hang it up, I don't want any trees or buildings, you know, shining through, so I keep the highlights to a minimum. So on the front now, here I'm covering with a hockey brush, very light coat of lavender oil again. And don't go crazy, you don't need much. If you do overdo it, just use like a paper towel and very, very carefully place it on top and let it soak up some of the oil. And again, my paint is mixed with oil. I'm gonna use mostly black and a little bit of that green in between to make the transitions. This time it didn't take me 1.5 hours. Because I'm only going to, you know, adjust some of the contrast I feel is lacking, and yeah, that's a much quicker step. Nevertheless, as always, take your time, and you know, if you don't do it in 2 firings like I do here, do it in 3. It doesn't matter as long as you're happy with the end results, of course. If there's a mistake, as mentioned, you can just use your brush to, you know, pull the paint away to another spot, or you can very, very gently, so you don't disturb the water layer, just use a Q-tip or even a little bit of a stippling brush. But yeah, that requires some skill and knowing what could happen, so careful with this one. Okay, so this is the result in the end, and thank you so much for watching. I hope it was a little bit helpful, and if you have more questions for me, please feel free to write me down below. I'll promise I'll be better at answering. I've been like logged out of my account for months, so again, apologies to those who have waited long for my replies on your questions from my other videos. But yeah, I'll try to make some more of these, and if you want, you can follow me on Instagram for more work. And yeah, I wish you luck with your next project.